In this video, I'm going to talk about finding intervals of increase and decrease. So when I draw on this graph, I'm going to draw the intervals of increase in red and the intervals of decrease in green. And so the way we're going to find our intervals of increase and decrease is we're going to read this graph just like we're reading a book, and we're going to scan it left to right, or we could look at it as tracing it left to right. And as I'm tracing the graph going left to right, if my pencil is going up, then I'm on an interval of increase. And when my pencil is going down left to right, that's an interval of decrease. So as I start this, going left to right, I'm going up. Okay, then about this point right here, it starts to turn, which is called a turning point. And I'm going down, so that's going to be an interval of decrease going down. Then I hit a turning point and I start going up again. And then I hit another turning point and I go down. And then I have my last interval of increase right here. So those turning points are going to be our local maxes and mins. Here I have a local max, and here I have a local min. Here's a local max and a local min. So those local maxes and mins are breaking the graph up into its intervals of increase and decrease. Now, when we write down our intervals of increase and decrease, we're always going to write it down as an interval over the x values. So when I write down my final answer, when I write down my interval of increase, I have, since this arrow right here, this arrow indicates that I'm going down and to the left forever. This arrow right here indicates I'm going up and to the right forever. And because I'm writing this with my x's, I'm looking at my horizontal values. So when I write this down, I'll call this interval 1. So when I write down interval 1, it's going to be from minus infinity up to 1. This is my breaking point. So from minus infinity all the way up to 1. Then my next breaking point, I'm going to go from 1 to 3 for my interval of decrease. Then my next interval is going to be from 3 to 5. So if I have more than one interval of increase, I need to write union 3 to 5. Then my next interval would be from 5 to 7. And that would be an interval of decrease. So I'm going to write it under the decrease. 5 to 7 with a union. And then my last interval is going to be from 7 to infinity. So I'm going to write that with a union here. So all my intervals of increase are in red, right? Because as I trace the graph, I'm going up. And then all my intervals of decrease are in green. As I trace the graph left to right, it's going down. So let's label these so that you have it in your notes. This is interval 2. This is interval 1. This is interval 2. That way, if you go back and look at your notes, you'll be able to see where you're getting these intervals from. This is interval 3, which would be from 3 to 5. That's this one here. And then this is interval 4. And then this last interval here would be 5. So when you look at the graph, if you're given a graph, you just want to look to see where your breaking points are. Those are your mins and your maxes. That's going to break up your intervals of increase and decrease. And then you're just going to look to see where when you're tracing the graph, where you're going up and where you're going down, when you're scanning it left to right, and that will tell you where you're increasing and decreasing. Now, if you're given the equation and not given the graph, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to actually have to find the maxes and the mins on your graphing calculator yourself. You're going to put this into your y equals, and you're going to graph it and then you're going to find your maxes and mins. Now, if you don't know how to do that on your calculator, I've included a video at the end of this lesson that you can watch to see how to do that. Okay, so when I go to graph this on my calculator, it's going to look like this. Now, this is just a rough sketch. I'm a horrible artist, so bear with me. I'm going to get a picture that looks kind of like a warp W when I go to graph that. And then when I go to find my maxes and my mins, I'm going to find out that I have a point here. I'm rounding to one place. This is going to be the point -3.2, comma, -48. So that dips down pretty low. And then I have a local minimum, or local maximum, at -3.9, -0.39 and 6. And then this point right here, which is a local minimum, is going to be the point 2, -32. Okay, so when I write down my intervals of increase and decrease, let's do increase in red, and let's do decrease in green. So when I trace the graph left to right, when I'm going down, it's decreasing. When I'm going up, it's increasing. So when I trace this left to right, this is going to be an interval of decrease. Then from here to here is going to be an interval of increase. Then from here to here is going to be a decrease. And then from here to here is going to be an increase. So my intervals of increase, remember we write it down in terms of our x values. So we're looking at our x. So I'm going to, for my interval of increase, I'll call this interval 1, so I can label it. Interval 1 is going to go from -3.2 up to -0.39. Union, and then my second interval would be from 2 to infinity. Now for my intervals of decrease, we'll call this 3 and 4. For my third interval, that's going to go from -infinity up to -3.2, union, and then my fourth, this is my third interval, my fourth interval is going to go from -0.39 up to 2. For this next graph, when I put that in the calculator, and again, if you don't know how to find your maxes and mins on the calculator, go ahead and look at that last video that I posted in the lesson. You're going to get a graph. Now, this is just a sketch because keep in mind, please, that I'm a horrible artist, but just a sketch. You're going to get a picture that looks like this. So we have a local min here and a local max here. So when I scan this graph left to right, this is going to be an interval of decrease, right? I'm going down left to right. And this is going to be an interval of increase because I'm going down left to right. And then I have just one interval of increase right here. So increase in red, we'll call that interval 1. And then we'll call decrease in green, and we'll call this interval 2 and 3. That way we can label it so you have it in your notes. Now, when I go on the calculator and I find my max and my min, I'm going to find that this point right here is at 0, 0, and this point right here is going to be at 8, 4. So when I find my interval of increase, we use our x value, so that's going to go from 0 to 8. And that is my only interval of increase. So I only have that one interval. I don't have to worry about putting in the union sign there. Now I have two intervals of decrease. That's interval 1. So when I look at interval 2, I'm going to write that down as -infinity up to 0, union, and then interval 3 would be from 8 to positive infinity. Okay, last graph, when I put this h of x in on my calculator and I graph it, I'm going to get a picture that looks like this. So I'm only going to have one local minimum. And when I find that value on my calculator, that is going to be the point -2, -2. So we're going to do, again, increase in red and intervals of decrease in green. So intervals of increase is going to be when I go up left to right. So that's going to be here. And when I go down left to right, that's this interval here, my interval of decrease. So let's call this interval 1 and this interval 2 so we can label it in our notes. So keep in mind that even though my x and y are both the same value here, -2, that I'm actually using my x values to list my intervals of increase and decrease. Okay, so now what we have to do is to find our interval of increase. That's going to be from -2 to infinity. We only have one interval of increase, so we don't need to worry about putting the union symbol in there. And the same thing for the interval of decrease. We only have one interval, and that would be from -3 to -2.